two, one, go.
Hello, and welcome to this live stream titled Podcasting 101. And we are joined here by
Okay.
technical difficulties, guys. Hello again. Welcome to this live stream called Podcasting 101. I know we are 5 minutes late. Again, technical difficulties, guys. But we are here to talk about podcasting. That's what we are doing. And if you are watching and if you have any questions, we have two people here, actually three now, because I also do podcasting. So we
Yes,
will
you do.
answer them. Yes,
Woohoo!
guys, please. So we have Amit Doshi, founder of IVM Podcast.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. And we have Gauri Devidayal, a host on our network. And I thought we can start by just talking about Gauri, your podcast, which is what is your podcast and why do you do it?
So my podcast is called "This Round Is on Me," and we do not record it live for this very reason. Why do I do it? Wow. I like the sound of my own voice, and I needed an excuse to get away from work, my day job. But
Yeah.
actually, now I love the sound of other people's voices clearly and what they have to say. And I just think there are so many cool conversations to be had.
Mhm.
So that's what drives me.
That's one of the things that I think that since we're doing 101, right, we should
Hmm.
kind of bring up that you need a healthy ego to do a podcast. You
That's
you
very true.
have to believe that dozens of people want to listen to what you say.
I'm hoping
So
it goes into the hundreds at
I
some
yeah,
point.
but at least dozens, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely we do. You definitely do need. You need to have a certain amount of confidence in how you kind of do this, right? You need to know that I'm talking and I'm not like just all over the place.
Yeah. And when you say ego, let's get into that a little
Mhm.
bit. What do you think is one of the three top qualities of a podcaster? What do you think? Why am I saying three? As many
Okay.
as you want.
Okay. All right. Now you're saying three because three. You're a podcaster. You understand the rule of threes.
Oh,
That's why we say
yes.
three. But I would say like a lot of things, right? Like, do you have something to say? Are you interesting? Are you? And I guess I mean people don't really have that much self evaluation as to whether or not they're interesting, but it is still kind of the question I think is important, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I think we always look for people who know a lot about something,
Hmm.
right? Even if the show is not about that thing that they know a lot about, they should be experts or fans or something, like they should know about a lot of different things,
Hmm.
right? It's obviously best if it equates closely. Like Gauri runs a business, she does a podcast which is not a total business podcast or a total food podcast, but it's in the adjacent areas, right?
Yeah, it incorporates it
It
for sure.
incorporates that, exactly, right? Meghnad, you're a politics guy,
Hmm.
you're a journalism guy, you're a economics guy. You do ELI 10, right, which is
Hmm.
a show on that. How to Citizens Who Do Come, which is a
Hmm.
show in that area, right? So you want people who do understand things,
Hmm.
or
I
who, yeah.
I think you do definitely need to be someone who can think on your feet
Hmm.
because it's a conversation, and the idea is not to run out of it
Hmm.
during
Yeah.
the show.
Hmm.
But also just I remember this. You guys told me this very early on in this podcasting journey, that why should someone give you 30, 40, 50 minutes of their time when there's so many different things that they could be doing, and so there really needs to be, and why you
Yeah.
over anyone else, so there really needs to be something that you bring to this
Hmm.
conversation that people would be interested in your
Hmm.
point of view.
I think learning is an overused term when it comes to podcasting, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I also think it is a core term, which is why it's overused, right?
I would say it's thought provoking as
Thought
opposed
provoking. Yeah,
to,
that's a good
yeah.
way to look at it too. I mean, like, yeah, I think two sides to the same coin, right?
Yeah.
In that way.
I mean, we are all podcast lovers here, guys.
Mhm.
We will wax eloquently about podcasts. I know that, but I want to get into what you just said a little bit more, right? So, say let's take this round is on me, right? What is it that you bring to the table then, which you think, let's say, is unique to you, maybe?
So I don't know if it's unique to me,
Hmm.
but what I do bring is a very candid viewpoint on my experiences on a subject.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, like whomever you're speaking to, right? For example, a wedding planner, or in fellow restaurateur, chef, someone in human resources. There's so many
Sorry,
different
you know
people.
what? You're making a fatal flaw when it comes to podcasting.
What,
You have a platform right now. You should plug your
the
episode. Say who
names?
you're
Oh,
talking
Yeah.
about so people know
so
what to
for
search
example,
for.
when I spoke to Bollywood, like Vidya Balan,
Hmm.
or Shweta Nanda,
Hmm.
or someone, a fellow restaurateur and chef like Rahul
There
Kerkar.
you go. Nothing wrong
So
with a little name dropping.
no harm, right? Yeah. And people in the wedding fraternity, like Joseph Raddick, etc. So you know um you think that, oh, what do I have in common with them? They're in a completely different industry. But when you actually start having a conversation, like you do with
Mhm,
anybody, you find that there is a lot of commonality. And it's really, just as much as you want to hear from them, you also have to bring your side of the story to the
Hmm.
conversation. And there's always something that that you can. And I think it has to be engaging, of course, but you don't know, and you don't go into it with that pressure that, oh, I better be interesting through this entire conversation. I think you
mhm.
just have to enjoy it.
I think that's important. You need to be in the
Yeah.
conversation.
I have a little bit of a different approach though, because so I again come from a journalism background, and I have been trained in interviewing,
Mhm,
in a particular way, and how the conversation needs to flow, and how it needs to be structured and all the things. So like we were given a duration कि अच्छा तुझे ये 40 minutes में खत्म ही करना है types, तो वो pressure आ जाता है, and then I have to get like 3 answers out of someone. So that is of course something that your podcast actually allows you more time
mhm.
to do this, because I think long form podcasts are a thing. I mean, like they're a
Yes.
big thing.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and people like to listen to
Mhm,
long form podcasts. So with podcasting now, what I've realized is that I get so much more time, so I can meander
mhm,
around a subject, go deeper, choose to spend more time on a particular question versus not spend on something. And there is no like compulsion of, oh, you have to end it at like 60 minutes. I can go till 75 if I think that the conversation is going interesting.
Or you could cut it at 40 if you think that the conversation is
No,
boring.
but
Rarely ever happens, but
But I think you
Theoretically.
hit on something really important that I was very conscious of, which is that it should not be an interview. Otherwise,
yeah.
anyone can have a list of questions and go in there and ask them
Mhm,
one at a time, right? So, this is what the
Hmm.
difference is, that it's not an interview, it's a
mhm.
That's
So
conversation.
actually a hot tip for podcasting
so I, I
101.
I would say this though. I would kind of I wouldn't say that that is a so for the longer form conversational stuff, it has to be a conversation,
Hmm.
right? When you are sitting and having a long when you're sitting for 45 minutes, an hour, and 70 minutes, whatever
Hmm.
that number may be, right? That has to be a conversation. But there are also valuable podcasts which are only Q&As,
Hmm.
right? Those are typically shorter, but they absolutely do
Hmm.
exist, right? And they are out there, and they're very informative. They give you a lot of, like, you learn a lot about
Hmm.
whatever subject you are, but it's a different form, right? So I mean, like, there are many different forms of what podcasting are.
Yeah.
I think that when we are looking at the
I mean,
kinds
you
of
have monologues as
we
well,
have
right?
monologues
Yeah.
as well, exactly. The kind of podcast that IBM is probably best known for are conversational shows,
Hmm.
which are of what we're describing, right?
Hmm.
They're conversations, and you should be able to float and move around
Hmm.
and all that. But we do the monologue shows as well. We have shows which are kind of tight in terms
Hmm.
of, like, how you structure them too.
Hmm.
So I think there are all of those.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have like
And
short form, like
Mhm,
10-minute episodes as well,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, how do you kind of decide when you're doing a show
mhm,
whether
Before
it
you
should be
answer
that?
that, I have like related questions. I'm taking them. Then we'll come to this question.
yes.
Shweta is here. Hello, Shweta. And if you guys are watching, please do ask questions. So Shweta is asking, which I think Gauri was talking about, long form versus short form,
Mhm,
and what are the listener stats or feedback on this?
mhm.
So do you have a view on that though? Like, your podcast is, I would say, long form.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that, oh, let me try like a short form, or how do you think about that? What do you
I
think?
feel like short form works better when it's a single, like, host only
Mhm.
show, because you get in there, you say what you have to say, and you get out. In a conversation, it probably takes that short form duration of
Yeah.
10 minutes to even just warm up and get into the conversation. So yeah, I think it also depends on how many people are in the
It
room.
matters. The kind of format matters. I think
Mm,
from a traffic perspective, to answer Shweta's question, right?
mm,
I don't think it matters. Honestly, I think that if you look at the three most popular shows we have on the IBM network, uh, let's say four, right? I
mm.
mean, like, I want to include the Tamil language show as
Yes,
well,
yes.
right? But I mean, like, if you look at What the Hell Navya, that's 25 minutes or so. If you look at Cyrus Says,
Mm,
that's like an hour 15, hour 30, depending on the depth, the day of the week and who wants to talk how
mm.
much. If you look at the Habit Coach, it's like 5 minutes, four
Yeah,
minutes, right?
yeah.
So we clear, and the Tamil show is around 20 minutes.
Mm,
So basically, you have four distinct lengths for our four most popular shows out there,
yeah.
right? And the Tamil show is Kadai Podcast,
Mm.
Ponniyin Selvan. Just I
Yes,
should
yeah.
plug as well. I
Yeah.
can't forget
Back
my
at
own
ya.
lessons. But it is the I mean, like, it's a tautology, but it's something I say whenever people ask me what's the ideal length, as long as it should be,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, like, there's no reason why it should be 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or
Mm,
40 minutes, unless the content is best served in that
mm,
And also,
length.
fun fact, you don't have to listen to the entire episode in one go, right? So if it is a long form
Mhm.
and you don't have that much time, break it up. It's fine,
Yeah, no,
mm.
absolutely. People do that too.
like you do with
Like, there
TV.
was a show that was previously on our network called The Seen and the Unseen, and that show is anywhere from 4, 5, 6, 7 hours.
7 hours, yeah.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah,
mean, like, and I seriously doubt that anybody is listening to 7 hours in a row,
yeah.
but you do. One of my favorite podcasts, non IVM podcast, is a show called Acquired.fm. It is two investors who basically do a whole bunch of research about these companies and their histories, and then just have these long
Mm.
2, 3, 4 hour episodes. I heard a 9 hour episode on Berkshire Hathaway
Yeah.
and the entire history of Berkshire Hathaway, right? Because there was first the Berkshire Hathaway part, then there was the Warren Buffett part, and then there was the Charlie part, right?
Mm,
And so, I mean, like, they had these three different parts, which are each 3 hours
mm,
long.
mm.
Their Amazon episode, 5 hours, 3 hours on
Mm.
Amazon, 2 hours on AWS.
Right.
And it's I mean, like, so as I heard it over many, many days, not
Hmm.
even like this, right? So, I mean, like, whatever it needs to
Yeah.
be.
Even like my one of my favorites is Hardcore History
Hmm.
by Carlin, and he does like 9 hour episodes on Japanese history or World War II or Greek
Yeah.
mythology. Like again, not listening to it in one go, but I listen to podcasts usually when I'm exercising in the morning.
Mm.
So it's like, an hour. Like I sometimes it happens that my podcast is not over, so I exercise more, and that is an
I
effect.
have sat in the car waiting for the episodes to get over. That's not uncommon behavior
Yeah,
for me at all,
yeah.
right? I mean, like, I'm like, oh God, there's 6 minutes left. Do I really want to start this tomorrow morning when when I'm leaving?
Mm,
Okay, let me just,
finish this.
yeah.
So Shweta's second question actually is the art of conversation and how important is that? One thing I wanted to add to what was just said. So we were talking about conversational podcast, but so now that I am here and I did a lot of constructed stuff like video pay. So I have been designing some
Mhm.
podcasts here as well. Now I won't reveal what the podcast I'm talking about is, but that we were doing this constructed show, and turns out that we were aiming for 10 minutes.
Mm.
10 minutes may, like it's a monologue, it's going to have like effects and all the things. Turns out some of the stories are interesting. It's like, actually this can be 15 minutes. And then
Yeah.
we just changed it. Now there are like two episodes done. One is like 9 minutes and one is like 16 minutes, but both are great. So Amit, please put it on quickly. Anyway, so
No, but that is actually kind of complicated, right? Because honestly, when you get so one of the things that I do believe, and this is again, we're talking to podcasters and what they want to do
Mm,
from a podcasting perspective, right? While I think that your length should be as long as it needs to be, no more, no less.
yeah.
I also do think that a certain degree of consistency is important,
Mm,
right? Like, and by consistency, I don't mean that every show has to be 12 minutes and 30 seconds exactly.
mm,
But what I do mean is that you should be in the range. If somebody is expecting to listen to a 30-minute podcast from you, they shouldn't all of a sudden get a 4 hour drop.
yeah.
And if they're expecting a 45-minute podcast, they shouldn't get a 5 minute drop.
Mhm.
Right. So I think it's important that that is also kind of looked at to some degree.
Yeah. Art of conversation. Gauri, do you want to take that?
I
Art
think,
of
yeah, we
conversation.
touched on that earlier. I
Hmm.
mean, I think that's really important. And sort of like you said, right? Someone who's got knowledge beyond just
Mhm.
what they do and be able to hold a conversation, that goes beyond
Mhm.
just your domain of expertise. And it's literally like having a conversation with anyone, right? You go to a
Hmm.
party,
Yeah.
you go out, for a meal, whatever. You meet people and you have a conversation. It's
Hmm.
kind of that. It's like you don't want to run out of it.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is a. It's interesting, right? Because I mean, like, when it comes to doing a podcast, right,
Hmm.
the art of conversation is essential. You need to be able to hold forth on, like, you never know what your guest is going to talk about,
Hmm.
right? I mean, like, you
Exactly.
might be having a conversation about one thing, and all of a sudden it turns into like something which is like 180 degrees away from that, right? And you don't, if you're unable to roll with the punches, if you will, right, or kind of just like make it work, it's gonna be troublesome. What I would say is, though, that one way to kind of also consider this, right,
Hmm.
is that the best conversations. So I mean, like, again, just saying that you need to be good at the art of conversation is probably not helpful for people who are trying to
Get into
figure
the
out how to
space.
do
Yeah.
this,
Hmm.
right? So I think, like, the thing that they should consider is you want to be prepared. You don't want to be rehearsed,
Hmm.
right? So you want to make sure that
Yeah.
if you have a guest coming on board, you've looked into the kind of things that they're going to talk about, or the kind of things that they've done. You don't want to be like, let's a podcaster who we shall not name, who reads the introduction and bios on the screen at the core when the podcast is first happening, right?
Yeah.
And that, that's something that very few people can get away with,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I think preparation matters. I
Hmm.
think the other thing that people don't.
Amit, though, I should say I do that also
Ah,
sometimes because, and
mm,
I'll tell you why. So again, explain like I'm 10. I realized this that I have to, I don't know, I'm in this habit that my start needs to be a bang. I think it comes from political speech writing a little bit also, because our biggest problem with political speech writing was that कि 30 seconds से ज़्यादा तो speech सुनना चाहिए. ऐसे कोई walkout कर गया तो it's very insulting. So I have this habit of writing out
ah,
what I want to say.
mm,
Like I just write it down, right?
correct,
And then
right,
I repeat it to myself for a while.
sure.
It's there in front of me, and then I improvise while I'm doing it.
Right. I do the same.
So okay, you're talking
I mean,
about
you're not going to know, like, you may not know this person from before. And so there's some facts that you want to mention where you don't want to, like, miss
okay.
out on.
All right, all right, all right. One is I was making a joke about Cyrus
Yeah.
Brocha,
Okay.
who basically doesn't even know who the guest is until he
Oh,
sees the piece of paper in front of him.
that's fair.
Okay,
That's
that's
fair.
different, right? I'm
To
not
be
saying
fair,
that.
the guy does a daily show.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay,
So
right.
cut him some slack.
But I was talking about that. But again, what you're talking about is preparation, right? You
Yeah.
are talking about preparation, right? What When I say I don't want rehearsed, what I mean
Hmm.
is that there needs to be a naturalness to the
Yeah.
sound,
Yeah.
right? It cannot sound as if you are reading something out,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
because that is as off-putting as anything could possibly be.
I
Yeah.
actually spend quite a bit of time. I end up spending quite a bit of time researching
Yeah.
and reading up about my guests, even if it's someone I know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not because, oh, then I just kind of create questions out of that, but it's just something that it might come up in
Hmm.
conversation and you're not caught entirely
Yeah.
It
off.
gives you a way to segue,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It gives you ways to so the so preparation is one part, right? The other part that I think is really important is active listening,
Hmm.
right? That when you are in a conversation with somebody, like, one of the things that, like, we have this YouTube comments going in front of us
Hmm.
right now, not that many yet. Hey guys, please send some comments, but there
Yeah.
are a few.
Hmm.
And when I see them, it kind of is distracting, right? And it takes me
Hmm.
away from what you guys are saying,
Yeah.
right? And active listening in that sense is super important, because if I'm listening to exactly what you're saying, I can react to that, right? Otherwise, I'm just reading out a list of questions, and that's no
Yeah.
good either.
That's not good. And I've had guests on my podcast also. Again, not naming any,
Mm.
but who
I've been on
started
your
looking.
podcast, okay, so I'm gonna know if you're
Not
talking.
you, not you. Nothing is about you when I complain. Uh, so I'm saying. So I've seen this. Like, I mean, when like, say, because it's a 3-person podcast and I'm talking to this one person, the other person will start looking at their phone.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like,
What?
I can
Okay, that
see
is
you.
not. I'm proud
It's
to say, in
Oh.
whatever 2.5 years, that has not happened.
But it is something that, so again, your format is such, right,
Hmm.
where that
People research also
could
actually on
happen.
the side.
There's a
Yeah.
bit of searching happening
Yeah.
as well, but your format is such where
Yeah.
it does become like Gauri's conversations is very conversational in that sense,
Mhm.
right? Whereas in yours, you have to moderate to guests as well,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So you have to make sure that this person also talking, this person also
Yeah.
talking, and so because of that, the person who's not talking might occasionally feel a
Hmm.
little left out.
Hmm.
And we have no attention spans. None of us do. Let's
Yes.
not. Let's. Like, I don't have an attention span. If you guys start having a 3 minute conversation about 30 seconds into it, I will look at my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Or YouTube comments, which
or
which
YouTube comments.
reminds me. Amrita has asked, what is an ideal duration for a podcast for beginners? Um, I don't think there is one.
I don't think there is either.
Hmm.
I think idea dependent. If
Idea
the
dependent.
idea is good, then you should do
Hmm.
whatever it takes, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It really is, right? I mean, like a narrative podcast should not be 30 minutes long. It just, sorry, narrative is a single voice narrative. It's just
Hmm.
you start sounding boring, right? At that point in
Hmm.
time. And so I think what is the format you want to do? What is the topic that you're going to be talking
Hmm.
about? How do these things kind of work?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, I guess that. See, I looked at a YouTube comment.
I know,
I got
I know,
distracted.
I got it, I got it. And I'm actually working on a video of my own, which I'm learning editing. The current duration of that video has already gone over 45 minutes. It's a
Okay.
single voice thing. I'm doing something politics
Ah.
related on for my show, and it's still not over. And then I'm still going to go at it. I'm just recording it in bits and seeing like if I can do this. Uh, so that's the thing. So like even I'm looking at it like a podcast.
Mhm.
I'm not looking at it as a video per se. It's a long form essay, right? So there also, I'm like, I'm not going to bother about time right now. This is my first one. Let's see what happens.
I actually, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point that how do you sort of now are the lines getting blurred between like radio content, podcast, what you and just the idea of conversations, you see them in
Mhm.
like or hear them
Hmm.
rather in so many,
Hmm.
or watch them in the case of
Yeah.
YouTube in so many different ways. So is this just something where
It's
repackaging?
so it's repackaging. That's one way of looking at it. But I mean, it's also just the world has changed a lot in the last 25 years with the advent of the internet, right? Where all content is distributed by bits, right? Bits is I'm sorry, this is philosophical in
Yeah, I
some way,
got it.
but bits are where we consume our contents in zeros and ones, right?
Hmm.
And a 0 and 1 can form up to create an audio file, it can form up to create an image, it can form up to create a short video, it can form up to create a long video, it can form up to create a book, it can form up to create an article,
Hmm.
it can create anything, right? And so the ability to move a particular piece of content from form to form to form, what earlier used to require physical production and distribution no longer does.
Hmm.
And so because of that, what you wind up seeing in the long what you do wind up seeing is you see a ton of different content being repurposed for
Different
different
mediums.
things,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
In different mediums, right? There was a really the guy who runs the podcast Flagrant,
Yeah.
his name is Andrew
Andrew
Schultz.
Schultz.
He had MKBHD on his podcast at one point in time. And it's something they said, which I thought was really interesting, right? He talks about how he uses, this is a old Native American saying, use every part of the buffalo.
Hmm.
You have the full podcast, but then what else do you do with it? Generate tweets from it, generate Insta from it,
Yeah.
generate shorts from it, generate blog posts from it, generate LinkedIn from
LinkedIn.
it,
Yeah.
generate every single
Hmm.
thing that you can from it, right? And I think that's what, that's the way the world is going. And so, we're just spectators.
I am so I'm obsessed currently, and I think for a year now I've been doing this again. Don't understand this behavior. So there are these YouTubers who react to things, but not like the movie reaction
Uh-huh.
things, but like it's like they're reacting to like some tweet that someone makes,
Mhm.
and then it goes from one to the other thing for an hour, right? And then like they watch videos, they do this, and they're just chilling, right?
Yeah.
So there are these people who have a do it like a job. They live stream like a job, which is they start at 11 in the morning and end at like 6 in the night.
Really?
Yeah, and like on Twitch.
Wow.
And what they do is essentially they give you the news ki oh ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai. Oh, Andrew Tate got arrested, so that stream went on for 18 hours, and I was watching like in bits and pieces for hours. I was like, oh yeah, I want to see what is happening. So it's running in the background.
Okay.
I mean, he's there. There are things happening on the screen. What they do is they also play a game on the side. So they're playing a game, they're watching a video, they're talking to chat, and it's like so engaging to
Yeah.
just be there.
I
I
mean,
don't
it's
get it, but
voyeurism, I guess,
yeah,
as well.
There's a voyeuristic element to it. I think there's also, I'm guessing that you're interested in the game they're playing,
yes,
right? Because that I
a
think
little
is
bit, yes,
that's the fundamental
yeah,
thing,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
That maybe not this game, but you got to this person who you're
yeah.
watching because they were playing a game you were interested
Hmm,
in,
hmm.
right? And that I think is the first initial
Yeah,
capturer of attention, after which you like this dude,
yeah.
right? Or girl, or whatever that may
Which
be.
is the big point. So when you talk about duration, right? I think likability is also a big
Oh
factor.
my
Huge.
God,
You
yes.
stick around if you like the person.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's basically
It
it.
is probably the fundamental thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like, if you don't like somebody, why are you going to give them this much time?
Yep.
Yeah.
You can only hate watch or hate listen so much.
That's true.
Yeah.
Also, I cannot listen to this one particular anchor who we will not name.
Mhm,
Can never do a podcast
mhm.
because also it's important. Like you need to sound pleasant on the podcast. Like you
Like
can't
a sexy
scream.
mic
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
voice.
So let me add this. I mean, like, or let me disagree with you from this perspective. He is a performer. He is clearly a performer with
Yes.
talent,
Yes.
right? And if you are a performer with talent, you know how to modulate your voice for the medium that you're
That's
in.
also true.
When you're on television, you are not listening on headphones. You are listening
Mm,
in a living room in all likelihood. That's where most of his consumption is occurring.
mm,
At that point in time, having a high dynamic range on your volume
mm.
is what is going to capture the attention of the people sitting around you.
That's true.
You do that when you are on a headphone consumed medium,
Mm.
which is why also if you look at almost all headphone consumed mediums, their dynamic ranges are pretty kind of consistent in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a little technical. I don't know how interested you are in that, but
Yeah.
it is a thing, right? And so yeah, that's
Yeah.
I think that's the difference there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Lazy Hippo is asking, Meghnad, are you the one responsible for the hollowness in my days by reducing Cyrus says from 5 to 3?
I guess I will take responsibility for
Yeah.
that.
No, because so Amit, this has been happening. Gauri, this has been happening. So they reduced 5 to 3 cock and bulls, and people have gotten addicted to obviously cock and bull because Cyrus is an addictive personality. I
Sure.
get it. I get it. I also listen to him. So I'm on his show, but I also listen to him when I'm not on his show. It's crazy. But the thing is that everybody thinks I did it. Like, and I'm like, okay, I'll take it. It's okay. But Amit did it.
No,
So
I did it. I acknowledge I
Mm,
did it. I didn't. Hey, I mean, like, there's no hiding about this,
mm,
right? I mean, like, there were multiple reasons for doing it. One is I thought that a frequency of 5 might have been too much. I think
mm,
that was one of the challenges there. And guys, there are money challenges. I
mm,
mean, like, I wish that I could do support stuff forever without having to worry
mm.
about P&Ls on different things, but I do.
Good segue into monetizing podcasts
Please.
also. How how much hope do you have right now, and we can have this conversation right now because podcasting is growing, people are listening to more podcasts. How monetizable is a podcast?
So, uh, let me put it this way:
Mm,
nobody is quitting the day job for this, right? I think
mm,
that the number of people who can do that are the number of people who work in roles of support the way, or work in a company like ours.
mm,
Other than this, I don't think that freelancers are, or independent podcasters are making sufficient money to because, again, honestly, the kind of folks who I think can create a sufficient podcast are going to make sufficient money in life. They are
yeah.
not people who are like, their long-term goals, their ambitions in terms of the kinds of money they need are going to be significant.
Mm,
And I don't know how to put a rupee value on this,
mm.
but it's not nothing, right? And to make significant money in podcasting today is difficult.
I
There
would
are
qualify that with
Yes.
India as well.
So I would say that actually this is true across the world. Okay, there are always the few exceptions.
Yeah.
We see Joe Rogan, we see Dak Shepard, we see a few like this, right? We see Conan O'Brien, we read these multi-million dollar deals happening, but this is not the vast majority of podcasters.
Mm,
Uh, yes, the CPM rates in on YouTube or podcasting from dynamic insertion suck in India,
Hmm.
but they suck in India compared to Indian currency rates and Indian
Hmm.
value of money.
Hmm.
Podcasting rates and internal dynamics, dynamic insertions in US suck according to US rates and insertions,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like it's just when you're talking about the automated fills, right? Whether it is on YouTube, whether it is on audio, whether it's on this, those numbers are never good.
Hmm.
So now it means that you have to go and work directly with the brand. Working directly with a brand is challenging as well. Brands have their own kinds of impetuses of what they want to
Hmm.
do. So that becomes challenging. Again, we've been reasonably successful at it, nowhere close to where we want to be, but we've had a number of partners who have come on over the last
Hmm.
year and a half, 2 years, right?
Hmm.
But again, it's hard. I mean, like, we have a team of 7 people who basically break their head against agencies, brands, this, that, all of that. Explain them first what the podcasting ecosystem is. Talk to them about why it is valuable to engage these listeners, even though the numbers are low.
Hmm.
How do you pump up those numbers?
Hmm.
How do you bring them higher? These are all challenges that are there.
Hmm.
And I mean, like, we have a really good sales team. They're a bunch of guys who have experience across all kinds of digital media. We have people who used to be at web pages, like, websites, big websites. We have people who used to do like IP selling. We have people who used to do radio. We have people who used to do television, and all of them, like, they're all out there trying to do this, and
Hmm.
it is not getting the degree of traction, to be honest, that I thought we would get by
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
But
Uh,
I feel like, and obviously you know this space a lot better than me, but just in my few years of doing this, where from when I started and people saying, "What on earth are you doing?" and
mhm,
like, "Why are you wasting your time?" to today now being reached out by people wanting to be on the show, seeing like every mainstream newspaper have a show. Like literally, it's getting more and more mainstream,
mhm.
and I think that the monetization bit will happen post that.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think we're sort of jumping the gun and expecting like
Hmm.
instant bucks, which will only happen when this
Hmm.
becomes more widespread.
So
The
I agree with
only
that.
place I realized, and when we were actually having this conversation with Amit also, the only place now I consume ads is on a podcast.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, because also I'm passive listening. I can't skip it because I'm either riding a bike or
Yeah.
exercising, whatever I'm doing.
And you haven't got the premium account.
No, but
No,
like a
I'm just
baked
kidding.
in
podcast.
Yeah.
baked in ads, huh?
So
If you're
like
downloading
Oh,
on
host
right.
ours.
reads
Ah.
and stuff,
Yeah.
like for example Lex Friedman, right? Like so, and different podcasters approach advertising in a very different way. Lex Friedman does all of his ad reads in the beginning,
Mhm.
so his first say 6-7 minutes is just ads. He's like, yeah, my ads end at like 8 minutes, so if you want to skip the ads,
Mm.
do that. But it would be nice if you listen to it and support my. I listen to it. I mean, it's okay. I want to also know what ads are sponsoring him, to be honest.
Mm.
But the other way to do it also is like there are middle host reads also, like in a Cyrus, for
Mhm.
example,
Mid
when
rolls.
mid rolls, and like there was this Heads Up for Tails
Mhm.
campaign that we did, or a Volvo campaign that we
Right.
did. So in the middle, Cyrus would do like a bit, or like someone else would do like host reads or whatever. Also, if you like the person, like the podcaster, I think the ad becomes way more effective than the
Mhm.
generic ad playing everywhere.
So I
So
think also I've seen that there's two types of ads,
mm,
right? So there's and I don't know if this is what you meant by the mid rolls, but
Hmm.
like the ads where it's a pre-recorded, like like a radio ad which
right.
just comes on. It's someone else's
Hmm.
voice,
Hmm. Hmm.
music,
Hmm.
Right.
etc. And then ads where someone is again speaking personally
Mhm.
about using a product or the effectiveness of a
Right.
product, and it's still clearly an ad, but
Mhm.
it's spoken by
The
it's
host.
narrated by the host
Hmm.
and in a more personal way.
Personal
Yeah.
way, yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of define that as host read, which is in the host reading out the
Hmm.
ad copy or even improvising the ad copy to some degree. And the other we call a network read, but it's an ad.
Right.
Hmm.
We call it network read to kind of contrast it from
Differentiate.
a
Yeah.
host read. But the idea is over there that's the same. So the difference in from our perspective becomes a host read goes into the show of that host.
Hmm.
A network read goes into all
Any
the
show.
shows on the
Yeah.
network, right?
Hmm.
Now, sometimes our hosts do network reads,
Hmm.
right? So that also, but and when we talk about mid rolls and pre rolls and end rolls, we're talking about the positioning within the
Yeah.
podcast, right?
Hmm.
So pre roll is before the podcast, a mid roll is in the middle, and an end rolls at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry.
But the reason for me saying this was, I have YouTube Premium. I have ad blockers on my browsers.
Mm,
I have don't watch TV,
yep.
so I don't consume ads there. So I think the only kind of advertising now I consume is either through podcasts or billboards.
Hmm.
And it's actually very interesting because I have been speaking to a lot of people about this,
Mm,
and of course these are matlab, not high net worth individuals, but like individuals with a comfortable income,
all right.
disposable income also, and who actually can spend money on like a luxury product
Mhm.
or something of that sort. So my thing is that in the future, I mean, even now, I feel like there will be realization even in brands that the ads that they put in podcasting are way more effective than anything else, also because the retention rate of a podcast is way more than a YouTube video.
So if I may, right? I mean, like, and again, I want to. So I'm on the podcasting side, but
Yeah.
I also have to understand what the brand's needs are
Hmm.
in this case, right? And so, if you think about it, advertising functions on two levels.
Hmm.
There is engagement and there is reach. Podcasting is amazing for engagement, right?
Yes.
Whether it's
Yeah.
memorability, whether it is working with the host, reaching out to the
Hmm.
host, remembering the product, right? I still buy Squarespace websites because I heard an ad about that like 10
Yeah.
years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is the engagement piece of it.
Hmm.
The second piece is the reach piece of it. Now, when you're looking at if you are a brand, then both things become important. But when you start looking at this from a performance marketing lens, which again, this bits and bytes have
Yeah.
all taken us into this performance world. Now, when you start looking at a performance marketing perspective, what you get out of greater reach is you get you wind up with that, right? And so the reach becomes the thing that brands are looking for, because then that becomes easy to calculate the math on,
Sure.
So
right?
I think there's a it's like, I mean, you're using sort of the more technical terms, but I think it's about brand awareness
Mhm.
versus conversion.
Yeah,
And that's what I equate like engagement with, is the conversion
correct.
piece, and the brand awareness
But
is the
so again, I
reach.
think awareness and conversion, right? So I think both of them are both. It's all in the similarish kind of space, but when I do think that my this was a little different from that, right? In the sense that when you're talking about awareness, generally awareness are reach campaigns,
Yeah.
but when you're talking about conversion, also conversion are also reach campaigns, because what happens with conversion is that when you start spending significant amount of money for reach in a digital world with a end product realization, you can start making math, right?
Hmm.
Basically, I put my ad in front of a million people, 1.5%, i.e., about 15,000 people will click it. Of the 15,000 people who click it, 12,000 will reach my landing page. Of the 12,000 will
It's
reach my landing
volume.
page, 150 will buy it,
Buy it.
right? Whereas, so that even when we're talking about conversions, that math comes in, right?
Hmm.
Podcasting is challenging from a technical perspective where you can't do that kind of
Mm.
thing.
You can't measure it also, I
You
think.
can
Then.
measure it to a degree of downloads, right? I mean, like we have
Yes.
a download now.
Yes.
We
Yes.
know where people are consuming our
Hmm.
content. The thing is though, that we know that people who download our content consume our content, so
Hmm.
that also becomes a positive. This, so it's a it's a
Hmm.
good, in my mind at least, right? It's a good buy for many brands.
Hmm.
It's not a great buy for some really mass market
Hmm.
brands, right? If you are a brand who is trying to reach people who so if you have a product which has high lifetime value. So for example, I mentioned Squarespace. It was a huge advertiser of podcast in the US 10
Yeah.
years ago. The reason why podcasting works so well for Squarespace is that once you get a website host, you're never going off it. It's $200 a year, year after year after year after year after year, right? So the lifetime value of the customer becomes high. You look at a car, lifetime value of the customer is high, right? Those are the mediums that make a lot of sense for podcast
Interesting.
advertising. When your lifetime customer value and your individual transaction number is low,
Hmm.
at that point in time, it becomes very difficult for a Coke or a Pepsi to advertise on a podcast.
Doesn't make
There are
sense.
some association things which make sense from a content perspective, but from a reach perspective or a hey, let me get this out for an
Hmm.
awareness perspective, Not really.
Interesting.
Okay, let's talk about a restaurant then. I will come to your question, guys, but I'm going into territory which I
I
think
feel
we
like there's
need to.
more abuse than questions in
Should we take some questions?
here.
Then I will ask Gauri hers. Okay, I'm going to take some questions. There are a lot of more questions coming in. Amit, you were doubtful.
Oh,
I'm saying I'm seeing questions now.
yeah, no,
Uh,
I see them. I'm happy.
yes. So Shweta is saying that some people need Google when you. Oh, this was about our earlier conversation we were having. Shardul, hey Shardul, hi, how are you doing? Meghnad and Gauri, extremely interesting topic, but I may be biased in favor of it.
That's good
We
to hear,
all
man.
are, but thank you. Uh, so
Next time you need to get someone who's not in the podcast world to be.
no, we are the evangelists. We will talk about it. Okay, there is Amit. How do you sell podcasts to advertisers? Actually, this is interesting.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay. So I think the first thing we do is we talk about what the product itself is,
Hmm.
right? And what are the offerings that we can make to a podcast,
Hmm.
to an advertiser, right? And so generally speaking, there are three types of activities that we try and work with advertisers on. Type number one is sponsorship,
Hmm.
right? So that means XYZ brand presents this round is on me, right? And that is a deeper kind of engagement piece. We'll work with them on all kinds of things, right? There will be host reads inside there. There will not be network reads. There will be maybe like a segment which is created specifically for the brand, different ways that you can do things
Sure.
of that nature, right? But this is basically broadly the sponsorship model. The second model is a inventory model. What that means is that you insert an ad so we use automated systems to insert ads inside our content. So basically you sell 1,000 impressions, you charge 2,000 rupees. That's it,
Hmm.
right? So 1,000 ads get placed, 2,000 rupees you bill.
Hmm.
That's simple, right?
Hmm.
This is generally where we use the network read forms. The third thing, and at this point in time, the largest part of the Indian market is branded content,
Hmm.
where you make content specifically for brands which become their IPs. So we've done a number of these in the last couple of years. You were on HDFC Bank's HDFC Mutual Funds
Yeah.
Investverse. We've done projects for Small Case. We've done projects for Intel. We've done projects for
Boat.
Boat.
Hmm.
We've done projects for like many projects.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, like this is the area where we see a lot of this. Checkpoint is one that I think we just closed again. They're doing a second season, which worked really well for them. Cap Gemini, we did a season for them on stuff which worked very well for them as well. But these are the, you work with
Hmm.
brands, you create a podcast for that brand
Hmm.
specifically.
Like an IP
It's
essentially.
an IP. It's an IP. It's their IP,
Their
right? So
IP.
basically, what winds up over there is that we have the network, and because we have the network, we have the skills to create podcasts well,
Hmm.
right? We know how to do this. And so when a brand wants to create a podcast for themselves, they typically go out to a company like
Hmm.
us and talk to them about creating
You know,
something.
it's very interesting, and it's been a few months since I've been here, and I think the learning on that front has been actually very good for me, which is so. For instance, I mean, like this branded podcast bit that he's talking about. Now, brands when they come to you and they're like, okay, so we need a podcast for a particular thing that we are trying to advertise or whatever. The ideation that goes behind that is actually very intense,
Yeah.
because like if you are a traditional advertiser and you're putting ads on a TV, you don't really need to tell the TV people that, oh, I want your content to be in such a way that it actually sells
It's
something that
unrelated.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
unrelated. But in this case, you actually have to create interesting content which is also sort of interest the brand,
Mhm,
but also interest the listener. So
mhm.
it's like such a beautiful balance to strike there, which is like, and it also difficult.
So
It
I
is.
actually, when you were talking about sponsorship, I
Mhm,
think one of the interesting things is that, and you were talking about reach earlier, right?
mhm,
Mm-hmm.
So we sometimes, or even brands, think about reach as only the listening part of
mhm.
the episode. But just as an example, like my episode which I did with Shweta Nanda, uh, had like almost I think 1 million views on the reel that I put up on
Yeah.
Instagram. Right now, if there was a sponsor,
Mhm.
that
They sh-
million would have seen. So I actually feel that it
so
also comes down to how you're amplifying,
so
Hmm.
and how the host and their guests are amplifying the
No,
the
that's a really interesting point, right? It's become a part of like so.
and this was just Instagram, right? Then
Correct.
there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
So part of the delivery sheet going forward, right? And I mean, like not going forward, we've been doing this for a few months now, but we were not doing this up until I would say about a year ago at all, right? But now part of the delivery sheet that we do includes creating collaterals, right? Because if you're going to eat every part of the buffalo, right,
Hmm.
it takes a lot of time to cut all those pieces up,
Hmm.
right? And so that is
But
not
that's where your like actual reach is happening.
correct. So that's part of what we are presenting now to brands, right? In terms of that, hey, we're doing this, we're working with this, we're putting these out. We will give them to you as well. You put them on your page, you monetize them, or sorry, you promote them if you want to push boost them if you will, right? And I think that we're starting to see some success in that kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
But that is a big part of it, right? It's also word of mouth, Gauri. It really is. There's a ton of word of mouth here, right? Like when you think about like a car ad or something like that, people talk about it,
Hmm.
right? Like again, like there are a couple of examples here, but so Squarespace is one I've spoken about because my in my previous life I used to basically
Hmm.
help people make websites, right? And once I left that life, I still had people, friends and stuff like that, asking me how to make websites. I must have recommended Squarespace 20 times,
Hmm.
right? I know that there are softwares like Go to My PC, which is basically these remote access softwares.
Hmm.
Again, heard on ad on the podcast, recommended. Audible, first time I heard about it on a podcast, recommended.
Hmm.
Excuse me. So, one of the things that does happen as well is there's a lot of word of mouth because
I know, but it's harder to track, and that's the
it
problem
is
that
very hard to
is,
track.
yeah.
But the thing that we try and communicate about this, right, is that you are never talking about your product the way you talk about your product on a podcast ad.
Hmm.
We are not radio, so you don't buy in 10-second increments, right? Radio ads, if you listen to them,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really that fast, right?
Yeah.
There's no
Whereas if
visual element
there's
either.
no visual element, it's really like they try and pump in every single second that they
Hmm.
are buying. Whereas over here, a podcast ad is a much more relaxed ad. You can go
Oh,
for
I have a funny story around this.
yes.
So I have a friend who listens to Cyrus. Okay, like, and we keep talking about Cyrus
Oh.
from time to time. Like, he's a big fan, and whenever he comes home, he's like, "Oh, kya chal raha hai?" Background mein, whatever. But so we somehow we were talking about EVs. Like, we are like, "Oh, should I get into an EV or a-" randomly he screams, "Volvo XC40 recharge." I'm like, what? And he's like, you guys have talked about that car for so long. And the thing is, the way he remembered it is because Cyrus kept forgetting it. And everybody else had to remind him the name all the time. So that is how he remembers, and the recall value there is so high. Where like when he thinks of EV, it's like Volvo XC40 recharge. It's like, okay. And even I remember it now.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this? Like that.
No, but
That's podcast product
Yeah,
placement.
that's
yeah.
exactly it, right? But that's the memorability of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you're listening to something or watching something of this nature, it penetrates your
Hmm.
mind. You're listening to it with the active listening that we were talking
Yeah.
about in terms of doing a podcast is also behavior that you see from a podcast listener.
Yep. And sorry, I got distracted with the
Yes,
comments because many came in.
that's good.
Um, so sorry. Shraddha is asking, I'm a good conversationalist. So I started a podcast, done season one, doing season two, but the audio quality and editing is basic, and we are using Anchor. What should be my next steps?
It's a good question. I think the first thing to do is listen to your entire season one and make notes and be critical with
That's the
yourself.
hardest thing to do, by the
Yeah,
way,
but you
is to
have to
listen
do
to
it though.
yourself.
Gauri, you remember
I know.
if you like you've now been doing this for a while, right? But I guarantee you this, right? If you go back and listen to a Kolaba Cartel episode, you will call me the next day and say, "Hey, let's take this podcast down."
Yeah.
Mm,
I guarantee you will tell me this, right? Because the improvement is so drastic, and it becomes drastic because you listen to your own self, you hear what's working, what's not working. I have a huge problem, like it's an unbelievably huge problem of filler words.
mm.
I use some ridiculous non-lexical fillers, right? Right, right,
Yeah. Mm.
right?
You know.
I know. Yeah, but so is one, but for me, right is my worst thing. I say the word right. I apologize for no reason all the time.
Mm.
Because I'm like, hey, sorry for bringing. I
Mm.
just for no reason, right? But these are all these non-lexical fillers, if you
Mm.
will, right? They don't have any meaning. I don't mean the word right when I say right.
Mm.
I don't mean I'm sorry when I say sorry,
Yeah.
right? But I just say them.
These are verbal ticks, right?
These are verbal
Yeah.
tics, and so I think you need to identify yours, because if you everybody has them without exception,
Yep.
everybody has them. So you got to identify them, and once you identify them, then you can start cleaning that up.
Mm.
Because I still say right, I still apologize, but I am now conscious of the fact that I do it. So if I do it 3 times, right, then I'll be like, dude, stop this shit.
Stop it, huh?
You know?
This happened with me recently where I was listening to my own podcast, just critical being I don't know, I think overly critical of myself sometimes, which also
Mhm.
happens. I heard an episode and I was like, God, I sound irritating. And I'm like, why do I feel this way? But I was like, in the introduction, someone made a face
Uh,
when I asked the question. It was very funny because in ELI 10, the third person doesn't know what they are, like there for. And when I asked the question, the shock and the amusement on their face is so much, I can't help but react, right? So I start laughing, or I'm like, haha, dramatic pause, something like that. Like today, for example, we had a pretty big guest. Will not spoil it, but the other person happens to be a giant fan of that person, right? So when he saw her, and when I asked the question, for like 2 minutes, he was just stunned. He was like, okay, what am I supposed to say now? Like, what is happening here? So it happens. And when I hear it again, I'm like, shit, I'm laughing too much. I think my laugh is irritating or whatever. But when I ask my producers, "Ki, do you think I'm irritating? Do you think whatever? Like, be honest, like, tell me, because I need to fix this." He's like, no, it's fine. I actually like it when you laugh like this, or like you go off your introduction or whatever. It's like it's an
It
element
sounds
of
natural.
yeah,
It's you.
natural,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
So which I think is also important, right? In
it is.
podcasting, you can't be that structured.
No, you don't want to be that polished for sure,
Hmm.
right? I mean, like it's important that you're articulate and that you are not constantly stumbling for words. If you kept hearing ums and ahs, that would be irritating,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time,
But how much of that can be edited out?
so it depends, right? I think that my own personal belief is that we shouldn't edit much out,
Hmm.
because I think it provides pacing to the conversation, which keeps it real to what happened in that room. Uh, Having said that, there are different shows where it makes sense to do that, especially if your show is a generally unedited show. If, let's say, you're recording 50 minutes and you're keeping 45, then I like keeping ums and ahs.
Hmm.
If you're recording an hour and you're keeping 22 minutes,
Yeah.
then you should smoothen it all out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I mean, on this point of audio quality, I remember for the first half of my show,
Mhm.
like the first year, it was during
Yeah.
COVID, and so we were doing it on Zoom.
Mhm.
And the minute the studio reopened, I was just like, it darted here.
Yeah.
And I have to say, and I have another show which I also recorded on Zoom, not an IVM show, but
Mhm.
it's called Women on Top in India. Point
You
noted.
should. You should.
This was because of you, Amit. But I recorded that entirely on Zoom,
Hmm.
and the audio quality in a studio is unmatched.
It's
Of
And
different.
so
course.
if you can do that, please, 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 do so, because it's just not just for you and your experience of recording, but I think also for
Hmm.
the listener.
Yeah.
I have a home studio now. So because when I joined IVM, I'm in Delhi most of the times, and I have to do a lot of
Mhm.
recordings remotely. What I realized over pandemic, thanks to the pandemic, is that I really need a good audio setup.
Mm.
Like before I joined also. So I got a microphone, I was doing a lot of experiments. I installed a bunch of drivers on my to smoothen out the quality. I did Audacity, tried to figure out how the sound levels
Mm.
work and what the hissing sound comes and whatever. So it's not a very good quality mic, but I'm actually satisfied. But I'm still not satisfied. So
Mm.
I'll probably invest in one more, and then one more, and then one more. So I think, Shweta, what you need to do also is keep a note of the sound quality that you are doing, and also soundproofing the room.
Yeah,
I
or
put
at least
towels on my
making it
window.
sound resistant. Exactly.
Yeah.
Towels on the window. If you're doing these remotely with somebody else, honestly, you get underneath a blanket with the laptop with
Yeah,
you. That
yeah,
shit works.
yeah.
I'm sorry, but that shit just works.
Absolutely
You
does.
know, so try and do whatever you can to,
Hmm.
because high quality sound, I think. It adds to the experience
Hmm. For
significantly,
sure.
right?
Hmm.
And I mean, like, there's nothing worse than hearing a bunch of crows in the
Yeah.
background, or like,
Hmm.
pressure cookers going off and all that shit which
The
we heard during the
doorbell. Yeah.
pandemic, right?
And I think it's also that thing of like not getting
Mhm.
distracted, right? And being present and
Yeah.
listening.
So I think
Actually,
that's a big piece of it.
guys,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, I get very annoyed when it happens when I'm recording.
Mhm.
But I have heard podcasts where this is happening in the background and I don't give a shit. It's like if I'm into the
Mhm.
conversation, sure, I hear the cooker. Sure, I hear the dog barking. Sure, I hear a Raddiwala screaming in the background or whatever. But honestly speaking, I also understand that, oh, so it's okay. They're living in this one space where things are happening.
It's I mean, like, I say this a lot in other contexts, but I guess, you can take a movie on your window, on your phone, and Sanjay Leela Bhansali will make a movie, and they're
Yeah.
part of the same thing, but they're not the
They're
same thing.
not the same thing.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
It's
And
that if you have a choice, then
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
do it.
if possible, like,
Yeah.
I think high production quality, especially on the sound side of things,
Mm.
right? Like, uh I don't know if you've heard this thing before, right? But like, in when it comes to movie edits, picture errors are fine, sound errors are absolutely no go,
Yeah. Mm.
because sound errors will take you out. A picture
Mm.
error will not take you out of the story in the same way that if there is a clip in the sound or something like that will.
That's true.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think that is so. Given that, the high production value becomes important.
Okay, more questions. Pretty soon is asking, as a podcast consumer, I like the video medium than the audio only podcast. What is your take on the future of podcast? Are they going to be video podcasts? And the second is how podcast is going to evolve with AI and metaverse.
Oh
Okay, let's
wow.
take the first one. The second one is a little
So I have to
complicated.
say something interesting
Huh.
on the video versus audio is
Okay.
that Jay, my husband,
Huh.
when he forcefully listens to my my
Hmm.
show, but he always, if he can, listens to them on YouTube.
Hmm.
He
Video,
watches them on YouTube.
the
Yeah.
video piece. Yeah.
It's just, I think it's just what engages
So
you personally.
there is a certain, like, there is some science to this, right?
Hmm.
So what winds up happening is that there are
Sorry, Amit, I have to
yes.
interrupt. So we are at 7 o'clock right now. Gauri, can you stay for a bit more to answer the questions, or you have to run?
Fine.
Yeah. Amit, can you stay for a bit
I'm
more to
good for a
answer?
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Go.
So there is a certain amount of science in terms of how people prefer to consume information, especially information which is quote unquote learning. So there are about one third of us are what are called auditory learners.
Yeah.
That is, we learn by understanding, or we learn by audio instructions.
Okay.
Okay. One third of us are visual learners.
Hmm.
What visual learners means is that basically you learn by you learn through like pictures, right? So basically,
Like visual memory,
visual
basically.
memory,
Yeah.
exactly, right? And one third of us are people who require demonstrations to learn,
Sure.
right? And
Like
so,
hands-on,
yeah,
kinetic.
so
Yeah.
podcast listeners who listen in audio are about, so okay, so one third is kind of the auditory listener, right? Let me give you a second piece of information here. If you look at, so India is a highly regulated radio market, right? We have, like, I'm sure both of you heard me say this like a
Yeah.
million times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, I'll tell it for the rest of the people here. India is a highly regulated radio market. And if you look at less regulated radio markets where talk radio is thriving, what you'll generally see is one third of the consumers are consuming talk radio, two-thirds of the consumers are consuming music radio.
Music. Huh.
So what these two things together kind of indicate, right, is that audio learners are people who prefer to listen to talk content,
Hmm.
because again, when you're listening to talk content, you're generally trying to you're trying to imbibe information,
Yes.
right? So that kind of is there, right?
Hmm.
So so the point that I am trying to make is that, sorry, what was the question that we were being asked?
Video or audio,
Or
Video
audio,
audio.
right?
yeah.
So what we do see right now, we start looking at, so we assume that there is a certain amount of audio consumption which is going to be deeper. We assume there's going to be a certain amount of video consumption which will be in higher numbers but shallower.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what we're starting to see play out. So far, our video strategy is relatively new. So the numbers have not exactly gone, they're not where they're going to wind up being, but we see very clear indications about how this is going to play out.
In a podcasting sense, though, video podcast, I feel like for example, yesterday I was watching Ravish Kumar's
Mhm.
show. right? Ravish Kumar's show on TV versus Ravish Kumar's show on YouTube
Mm.
somehow is very different for me, but it's the same thing.
Mhm.
He's monologuing about something, some news item that is happening, etc. On TV, I'm watching, but on his YouTube, I started treating it like a podcast for
Mm.
some reason. He's doing the same thing. He's in the
Did
same
you
room.
watch him on TV or did you watch him on
Yeah,
So
NDTV's YouTube channel when
no,
he was on TV?
I watch. I mean, NDTV's YouTube channel.
So that was also, it was not
Yes,
television.
yes. I mean,
So then it has to
obviously,
do with production, no?
no, but like it is essentially, I don't know what shift happened in my
Oh.
head, honestly. Like, but what ended up happening yesterday was it was on my phone, and my phone was on somewhere in the hotel room, and I was listening to him
Hmm.
like a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And I consumed like 2-3 episodes in one go, right? I've started to realize this a lot about video content also, because I see a lot of video essays, one of which I am also trying to do, is that for the first few minutes I will watch, and then it is running in the background.
Hmm.
Even though I can see there are some visuals happening, something is happening on the feed, but the audio is more important to me than the actual visual. And I am a audio learner. I have always been. I believe that. And therefore I feel like it's more comforting for me to just get information through my ears
Yeah.
more than my eyes. uh, I just feel that way.
I think
I,
people are different.
I
Hmm.
also feel that it's about whether people see this as a way of
Yeah.
multitasking, right? So
Yes,
if
Yeah.
you,
efficiency.
yeah,
Yeah.
efficiency.
Yes.
So for me, it's always like I'm in the car, or I'll be like, okay, when I'm, when I'm at work, when I'm heading to work, I'm gonna listen,
Mhm.
or when I'm go for my walk. I really like if I have an hour to just chill at home, I don't want to just watch
Mhm.
people like I want like entertainment
Yeah.
then, and this is a form of entertainment, but for me mentally, then I'm
Yes.
like I can't like drive and watch Netflix, but I can
True.
drive and listen to a podcast.
So
So
I think people differ, right?
yeah.
So I used to think of myself as an audio only listener. I will never watch. Why would I watch a podcast on YouTube? I will do what Gauri is saying. Let me, if I'm at home and I'm chilling, why the hell would I watch a podcast? Or why would I watch a podcast? Let me watch Netflix or Amazon or whatever, right? I found that changing over the last couple of years, especially over the pandemic. Because I think one is the supply of high quality podcasts on YouTube increased.
Yes.
And I think that became one piece of it, right?
Mhm.
Earlier, there was not that much there. The other thing I think it is that I enjoy this form of content, and sometimes I don't want to like. So, this is going to be a rant which is not related to podcasting,
Hmm.
but the problem with a bunch of Netflix and Amazon shows is they're too fucking intense. Okay,
Yeah.
I would like some light-hearted shit at
Yeah.
the end of the day,
Right.
right? And so that is generally a podcast,
Right.
right? If I can go and watch an episode of a Bill Simmons podcast or a Joe Rogan podcast or a Dak Shepard podcast or Bill Maher or any of these guys, right? Even on our this, like I go home and watch an episode of Cyrus. I don't get to watch or listen to as much Cyrus as I used to. I used to know what was going on in every
Hmm.
episode. Now I barely dip in, right?
Hmm.
And so can I go and watch an episode of that? Can I go and watch an episode of Gauri
Yeah.
show? Can I go and watch, this I can do at home, and it's a great lean back experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but again, I have changed. This is not what I was 3 years ago.
Hmm.
I
Before the
think I
pandemic, I was
genuinely feel like it's a positioning thing. Like
yeah,
podcasts were originally positioned as audio format only.
Yes.
Whereas, so that switch, I mean, if you think about it, you're watching news, it's two people on the screen
yeah.
talking. So it's not like, oh, they're
It's not
dancing and
exactly. It's not
they're
the
like,
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
there's sort of entertainment happening, right? So the fact that there are 2 or 3 or whatever people on the screen talking to each other is not
Mm-hmm.
something new. It's just, I think it's just conditioning.
Hmm. Weirdly enough, today a statement came from a very big industrialist who is not doing well. I heard it. I mean, I was playing the video, but I heard it, and it's like, why do I need to look at him? It's, I mean, yeah, I get what you mean. I'm going to take a few more. The
Yeah.
AI and metaverse question will come to later,
Sure.
but I'm going to take Sushant's question here quickly. How professionally cut, edited does a pilot or initial episode need to be? Can it be an essay style soliloquy?
Soliloquy.
Soliloquy.
Soliloquy. How
Soliloquy.
am I? You're the fucking writer. How am I
I don't
correcting
know
your
how to pronounce
pronunciations?
this shit. Like,
It's
क्या words use
very-
करते हो? Wow.
Yeah, this is revenge, by the way, for what you did to
Hey,
me.
please,
I just want you to know.
instantly judging
Okay.
my intelligence
Okay.
based on my location. Wow. But I would say I don't think it's that important in the beginning. I think you will learn as you go along. I feel like that's also important to say.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was told something very different.
No, but it's important to put it out there. Okay, I'm a big believer that if you overthink your content
Yeah.
a lot,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
pointless. Do not do that.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah,
just
but
put it out.
it's probably not gonna happen in one cut. So
Yeah.
just like do put your best foot forward, and
Yes, yes, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
So
it's that one chance you
allow
have.
me to tell you the story of
Yes.
how I did my first podcast.
Right. Go on.
Right.
Go on.
So my first podcast, well before I started IBM, was a podcast about the Wheel of Time books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was a
Oh, you
geek.
read that?
I'm a geek,
Okay. Yeah.
dude, more than once.
Arey wow.
I'm a geek.
Uh-huh.
You would not believe. But I've read them more than once, and so I did a
Never thought
podcast called
that.
the Whatcast, the Whatcast, WOT Wheel of Timecast.com.
Uh-huh.
This was, I want to say, 2007 or
Mm,
something like that.
mm.
So like really long time ago, 15 years ago now. I met this dude on Library Thing, which was the Goodreads of its
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
and we used to argue about Wheel of Time theories all the time on the forums. And we're like, hey, let's do a podcast. So South African dude, we did it. It was like at that point in time, I have a degree in communication, mass media, so I've done radio, TV, film stuff. But I was completely unaware of the podcasting thing. It had just started happening at that point, right? And I figured all of it out essentially by myself. I got episodes out within a week. We
Hmm.
figured out like, okay, we're gonna have these conversations on Skype. There was no video at that time, so
Hmm.
I've never even seen this dude's face. Right? I
Hmm.
mean, like now we're friends on Facebook, which is when I found out.
Right.
Okay, this guy looks like this. He's like this big, fucking, bulky rugby player.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
like, oh my god, this is what you look like. All right, cool. But yeah, so we did this. We did the recording on Skype. We figured this out. Downloaded Audacity, cut the podcast, put it out in a week. I mean, like at the end of it, was that professional? God, no, I wasn't a professional at
So you
that time.
figured out how to put it out as in like an RSS feed, how to create
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
all
I
the
mean, like
things.
WordPress, some I think Blueberry or
Uh,
Blubbery extension. Extension to
hmm, hmm,
WordPress, where you then, if you create a blog post and you tag it with podcast as a tag, it then forms an RSS feed which you can then
Oh,
kind of
interesting.
submit to iTunes.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
At that time, there was just iTunes to submit
Yeah.
to. There was
Yeah.
nowhere else,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I did the whole thing like that,
No,
and
but
it's
that's a different time, and I think today, if you can sort of,
no. So you have better
I think
tools.
it's that thing that just put it out there, like
Put
Yeah.
it out
don't
there.
No,
overthink
you have
it.
better tools, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, like, I
exactly.
think Shweta mentioned that she used Anchor for her podcast. Anchor is a great editing tool.
Oh, it's so easy.
Yeah, it makes it very easy.
Yeah,
So I
it's
mean,
very
like,
easy.
it's so again, to come back to the first comparison we made,
Hmm.
right? You can make a video on your phone also, and Sanjay Leela Bhansali also makes videos only. It's the
Yeah.
same, in some ways it's the same medium,
Hmm.
but there is a definite difference in terms of how
Production quality.
production it is. Yeah.
The one thing which I would add to sort of this is, I was very reluctant in the beginning when I started doing video shows. And Abhinandan, who was my ex boss, he's a big taskmaster,
No.
right? So it was my first video that I did was like 15 minutes long.
Mhm.
He made me do it an entire day. We did about 15 to 20 takes of the same thing, and then we did it again the next day. And I feel like that just made me more comfortable with the
Mm.
medium also, because I was super awkward on the
Yeah.
camera. Now when I look at those videos, I'm still feel like I was awkward then. I was way awkward than what I am right now. So I feel like, but what to answer your question, just put it out, get feedback.
Yeah.
That's important. Get feedback from friends, family. 10 लोग भी देख रहे होंगे, 20 लोग भी देख रहे होंगे, उनमें से 3 लोगों ने भी कुछ भी बोला, तो just take that feedback, incorporate it, and then put out more. Just keep improving and do it over time. I think that's
We were talking about this before, right? That most often the feedback that you get is only the positive stuff.
Mhm.
And you
Mm.
rarely get people saying, like, oh, you didn't sound good, or that conversation wasn't
Or
that
at least it's
exciting,
not
or that, it was too long, or whatever. Like, people don't tend to tell you that. They only tell you the good things. So
unless it's
try
in
and,
like bad faith, right?
Mm.
There are people who
right,
basically troll and like,
right.
you suck, which is fine. That's different.
I'm not that
Yeah.
popular. So.
You'll change.
Okay, we'll take a last few questions, because I think Cyrus says channel has raided our feed for some reason. Okay. Uh, so there is, I think, one question which I saw. How to increase the reach of a podcast? This is Hero asking.
Okay. That's
Million
well,
dollar question.
yeah. I mean, like, if you come up with an answer, Hero, please let us know. But again, it's about doing the right things, right? I mean, like, process over results in this kind of thing.
Hmm.
Kind of figure out, like, the things that you see as something that could help. You have to apply your best efforts to it, but it's about being consistent with the process, right? I think that the one thing that we have seen over and over that works is that if we have a consistency in terms of output, whether it is the show, whether it is the collateral around it, whether it is the conversation around it, whether it is getting the host on to kind of talk, just all of this, right? It's just
Hmm.
about being consistent.
I have my one of the
Or you can
podcasts
spend lots of money on advertising. There
also.
is that.
One of the podcasts I'm obsessed with, Empire
Mhm.
by William Dalrymple and Anita Anand. I heard it from two more people who's like, "Oh, great podcast! You should listen to it. Please listen to it. Please listen to it." And I heard it. I have recommended it personally to millions of
Mhm.
people now. They have hit a million downloads. Like William Dalrymple put it out, and then in one of the episodes, they actually said that we didn't do anything, like except put it
Mm.
out there.
Yeah.
I think that is also very important, right? If your
So
content is good,
no, 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 no,
and
no, no, no,
also
no, 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 no,
also
no, 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 no.
the I know William
This
Dalrymple is
sounds like
Yeah.
famous. William Dalrymple is famous. I was getting there, but also the thing is, William Dalrymple's books I haven't read. Anita Anand, I don't know. William Dalrymple name I knew, but the reason why I heard it is because I'm interested in history, and people told me that if you want to get a historical perspective on the Indian independence movement, listen to it. It was not because it was William
So
Dalrymple.
there are a couple of things there. One is William Dalrymple himself is very well known.
Yes.
So there is a certain amount of interest for his content,
Hmm.
and it's a great show. I heard it. You recommended.
Yeah.
I heard it. I like it. It's
Yeah.
amazing. The second thing is that they are on a history podcast network. So all of
Oh.
the podcasts on the network that they are on are history related
so the
podcasts.
consumers already are
Okay.
So
filtered.
it's a
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
So they and
targeted.
they promo on all across the network,
Got it.
right? In that kind of
Got it.
context, right? So that becomes number two. Number three is there is an academic kind of piece to it
Hmm.
because it is academic in nature, whereas all of our stuff is commercial. They've been able to get grants and trusts, which allow them to put together some marketing spends,
Sure. Sure.
right? And so there is all this kind of stuff that
behind the
is there,
scenes.
which kind of does happen.
Mhm.
Again, it's a great podcast,
Hmm.
right? And honestly, I mean, like, I'm glad that it's done a million downloads at this
Hmm.
point
Hmm.
because that shows that you can make this kind of a show and get that kind of an audience,
Hmm.
because we don't do those kinds of numbers on anything but like general entertainment,
Right. Right.
right? I mean, like the four shows we mentioned up top, right?
Hmm.
Those are the only shows that do those
Hmm.
numbers.
But the interest is there, definitely
Yeah,
there, in the
absolutely.
No, for sure. I
podcasting
mean, I've
space.
seen it like grow
Yeah.
since I started. And then the other thing, again, coming back to that point, is how to increase reach is put it out on every bloody
Yeah.
platform because
Yeah.
every single listener counts, and
Hmm.
you're trying to build loyalty, right?
You've
So
been trying to put. You've been not trying, but you've been putting out a
trying,
lot of
yeah, indeed.
reels from
Mhm.
your podcast. In a bunch. So there was this one which you said went viral with
Mhm.
Shweta. But other than that, like, what is the kind of feedback you're getting on your reels and other content from the podcast you're putting
So
out?
what I like is that so obviously on Instagram, reels
Hmm.
are
Yeah.
effective. So it's silly not to take advantage of
Hmm.
that. But I think that given that it's the format that it is, having that snippet does make a difference. So again, just when you're trying to engage someone, like a text post with just the title and the guest name, could have maybe less of an impact. I
Yeah,
don't know. I'm not saying that definitively than someone being drawn in with with a 30-second,
we got to do it all, right?
yeah,
I think
You've
that's
got to do
exactly.
it
yeah,
all.
we got to do it
Yeah.
all. So that's
Um.
the way you increase reach.
Okay, last question I think we'll take, which is AI and metaverse. Let's just get this quickly and then we'll
Sure.
end this. So yeah, future of podcast because of AI and metaverse. Do you have a
So
view?
I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think we'll start seeing is that podcast consumption in metaverse space. So people
Ah,
will
that's
go for live
interesting.
podcast
That's
recordings
fascinating.
where you will. So I think that's one of the things you're going to see for sure. I think
Hmm.
that also, honestly, to get this is okay. This is just my opinion. I'm not this, but I think that to get good experience of the metaverse, you need to be in sound treated spaces,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so that means that the kind of content that can be produced as well in the metaverse can become pretty strong.
Hmm.
The amount of different people who you can bring in to kind of do high quality content from a production standpoint also gets strong. I also think that you will start seeing a lot of you're going to start seeing a lot of stuff, a lot of activity in the avatar space.
Hmm.
right? Especially when it comes to podcast and podcast creation
So you
stuff.
mean like the real host isn't there?
So I mean that. So okay, brands are very interested in digital avatars. This is something that we are kind of seeing as a thing right now, right? Because the truth of it is that an avatar will do whatever the hell you tell them to.
Hmm.
There's no kind of like, hey, this doesn't sound right. Why am I doing this? There's none of that. Avatar says you say these words, they say these words. That is something that brands appreciate.
Hmm.
So, given that, I think that there are some interesting possibilities and opportunities around avatars in the virtual space going into the podcasting space.
Interesting. Live recordings in the metaverse. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yep.
Yeah, that
Live.
sounds great.
Mm.
For a relatively like techno challenge person, I can't share your enthusiasm, but
uh,
I'll take your word
I
for
have
it.
I have a view about AI though.
Mm.
I feel like and again, it's a scary thought, but I think it will happen in a few years. So let's just deal with it. I feel like AI is going to replace a lot of things that we already
That's what
do,
I thought you meant, that
and
like the host, it'll replace the host.
that's what I
No, so
was coming to
Yeah,
actually. That there would come a point where we wouldn't be able to differentiate if an
right.
AI is saying things versus a human is saying things,
yeah.
and then
It's the
in
college
that
professor
case
syndrome.
you give a imagine this, and it is actually very interesting if you think about it. You give a prompt to like a chat gpt right now, and the chat gpt
Yeah.
generates text. You give another prompt, it generates text.
Mm.
You keep doing it and you get a book,
Mm.
essentially. uh, think about it. If you give a prompt and the AI is trained to create a half an hour podcast, which is like in audio with
Mhm.
like all the inflections etc that can come in, like I can basically train it to have like the same inflections that Amit has.
We already done that.
uh,
That
But that's
exists.
what
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you meant. That
No, so
basically, yeah,
doing stuff
an
on
avatar is kind of just putting a face to it.
yeah.
But
So
yeah,
there are no. So I mean, like I don't believe that human minds can be replaced for content creation. I
Hmm,
don't believe that. I
hmm,
think that you're going to need humans to actually create the content piece of it. AI is good from the perspective of research and from maybe giving you a skeleton for how the content should function. It's a tool. It's not going to be a replacement. What I was talking about is, and this is honestly, this is it's called AI, but I don't really know if this is AI or not, right? But things like you get a voice and you have that voice trained by AI,
hmm.
and then you can do text to speech in that voice, right? So we
Yes,
did some
yes. Hmm,
experimentation around this with Ashlyn a few months ago, just to kind of see how it works, right? So I think that is a possibility. I think where you will see a lot of AI usage is scripted podcasts, which is mostly
hmm.
narrative or things like that, and translated versions. You will see a lot of
Yes.
translations happening through AI. I
Hmm,
think that's going to
interesting.
be a big kind of. So when
hmm,
we make the habit coach in like 4 years from now,
hmm,
I can release the habit coach in 18 languages
hmm.
Without having 18 translators.
You
without
know,
having 18
what would be
translators.
fascinating then if you add a layer to it? Can two AIs have a conversation? Again, like think about
Well,
it.
that's
Like
what you're saying. That
yeah,
sort of dynamic
Yeah.
nature of conversation is probably a
that's
little
actually
harder.
Yeah.
a bit questionable because I mean, like three of us are talking right now. Obviously, it will not be that natural, at
Mhm.
least in the coming years. So that will not be
I'll tell you
replaced.
what, going right back to that original bit of bringing yourself and bringing the personal aspect into the
Mhm.
conversation, I think that's
Hmm.
hard to
It is.
replace.
It's always hard, right? But I also like, there's, I mean, like you'll see the uncanny valley in all these different spaces, right? I mean, like we talk about that in animation, but you're going to see that in everything.
Yes,
I'm uncanny valley aware, not aware.
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
would know. Yeah.
yeah.
But basically, it means that if something looks too realistic but not completely realistic, it makes you uncomfortable,
Hmm.
right? And so we want something. I think that's going to be an area where audio will suffer,
Hmm.
or where basically AI will suffer if you try to create audio
Mm.
through AI. At least, I mean, like, who the hell knows what happens after 20 years, right? I mean,
Yes.
like, one of my favorite Bill Gates quotes, right, is that technology always, people always underestimate how far technology will be in 2 years and always overestimate how far it will be in 10 years.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's actually
other way around.
other way around.
They always overestimate how far it'll be in 2 years and underestimate how far it'll be in
Mm.
10
10
years.
years. Yeah. That's actually a great way to end this. There are a few more comments, etc., whatever, but we can do this again, Amit.
We can do this
There
again.
were like a lot of people here. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Gauri.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for hosting. This round is on me, guys. Please check out Gauri's podcast. This
Ooh.
round is on
Shweta
me.
Bachchan, Vidya Balan. I'm saying film star names because I know film star
Yeah.
names have so much.
No, but my favorite was the Rahul
Rahul Akhirkar
Akhirkar
one. That was a great
episode. I
conversation.
feel like just go and listen to that episode because he has stories, and also he is excellent, and also sort of the Amitabh Bachchan of the restauranting world, as someone told me that, but he's great. I will
Yeah.
listen to that. Also, she did an episode with me on how to run a restaurant, which actually, Gauri, must tell you, fan favorite episode. People were like, this is a very different thing than what you do usually do, and we really like it. So which actually took my show into a very different direction in general. It's like, oh, actually people like this, so I'm going to do more of such things. So thank you, Gauri, and thank you, Amit, for being here,
Thank
and
you.
thank you guys for tuning in. We will do this again. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave feedback in the comments below if you want more podcasting conversations, which will happen on this channel.
Awesome.